So, I have the great honor and pleasure to, they will be talking about all that in a much more informed way than me, because some of them monitor and spare some of those programs. And there is one person who actually was introduced to me by a colleague and friend as the queen of financial literacy. So this is Professor Annamaria Lusardi, professor at Stanford University and a renowned expert in financial literacy. The queen, as I've heard. But we also have the great pleasure of Joachim Nagel, president of the Deutsche Bundesbank, Claudia Buch, chair of the Supervisory Board of the ECB, Fabio Panetta, governor of the Banca d'Italia, and Klaas, not president of the Nederlandsche Bank, all of them committed to what I have just introduced briefly. So I will start with you, Professor, because there's nothing like a good academic start to get the debate going. So can you just focus on those key elements that your research has produced for you, for the benefit of all? And I know that both our consumer survey and the Netherlands banks have been good sources of information for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. When you start working on financial literacy, you cannot stop working on that and work on anything else. And apparently, you even get a royal title, maybe if you do so. But this is because financial literacy is about the future. Is about the decision and the skills we need to make in our fast-changing world. And that's why it's so important. And the reason why the meeting is so important today is that the research over the past 20 years has shown that the gender difference in financial literacy is pervasive and stubborn. But there is also more in the gender difference than just difference in knowledge. And that's why also the data is important to look at. What is striking in all of the studies we have done is indeed that gender difference are present everywhere, in every country, in every time period. We even did a global survey covering 140 countries and more, including Peru, and we see, of course, a gender difference in every country around the world. And it is pervasive. It is present among the young, and is present among the old, is present among the married, the uneducated, and the educated one. And I want to show this graph here to show that, unfortunately, we also see it in Europe. This is the data from the Consumer Expectation Survey, the most recent data. It covered 11 countries in Europe. And as you can see, not just is it present in every country, but in every age group, in every education group, in every income group. And thank you, President Lagarde, for this data, because it really allows us to be a lot more precise, to understand a lot more about what we can do. And let me also thank the research team here for working together on this analysis. How can we explain this finding? Why is it financial literacy everywhere? When we study, and in particular we look across country, that's the important part, we also notice another permanent feature, which is that women were disproportionately more likely to respond to the financial literacy question, and we have designed very simple question to measure financial knowledge. We are testing the ABC of financial literacy, but women disproportionately say, I do not know. This is an important finding, because when we actually drill down, and this time using Dutch household data, so thank you also for providing all this very useful source of information, we found that we asked the question as we normally ask, and then 6 weeks later, we took away the I do not know options. What we discover is that women know more than they think they know, but unfortunately, they are not confident in their answer. So the gender gap shrinks a little bit. It can explain 1/3 of the gender difference in financial literacy, but we also found that women say, I'm not confident in my knowledge. And that matters because, for example, that lack of confidence is a detriment for women to invest in financial market, to invest in the stock markets. When women are faced with complex financial decisions like this one, they shy away. And this is a detriment for everybody. Let me also show that financial literacy affects more than the lives of women. In this next graph, I'm actually going to talk about the ECB credibility and financial literacy. I know also, and I hope you expect, that when you invite an academic, they are going to show you a lot of slides. I have many of them, but here actually what I really want to do is actually show just how important financial literacy is. As the ECB is increasing the interest rate to guarantee price stability, when we ask the respondent in the consumer expectation survey, do you think that the ECB, how likely it is to achieve price stability? We see this divergence. Is the women with the high financial literacy that think that the ECB is doing the policy to achieve price stability, instead the low financial literacy actually even perceive the credibility of the central bank much less. What am I saying and why is this important? Is because the implications of financial literacy are far-reaching. They go beyond the lives of women. They also affect monetary policy. They also affect society. And this is why it's so important to change the statistics. It is not mission impossible. All of us have a role to play to do so. Media, central banks, and the media, and academics as well. Because the question that we have at stake here, which future do we want to build?
Terrific. So that's a perfect segue into what you can tell us, President Nagel. You have programs in place, you act, and you are going to tell us where you think you can move the needle.
So thank you very much for having this opportunity to talk to this very important topic. Let me start by mentioning, I learned it this morning when I checked the news, that today is Equal Pay Day. And Equal Pay Day, I know the German data, it is still the case that women are earning 16% less compared to men. So this is, and I guess some of this is alluded to the fact that you already give us here in your presentation, that financial literacy is an important factor behind that. So the Bundesbank, my institution, it's not our primary task to do a lot of work on financial literacy, but we are doing this. And over the past couple of decades, we talk to teachers, we talk to students, we talk to school kids. I guess it's important to give a good understanding what we are doing, what central banks are doing, and we are doing surveys. And the survey we did last year was related to what you did. We asked also women and men questions regarding financial literacy. And the outcome is, it's pretty much the same. So 55% of women answered the questions correctly, compared to 60%.
Oh, it was like a quiz.
Yeah, it was like a quiz. And 68% of men. So there is this gender gap, and we have to work on closing this gender gap. This is an important factor, and I already said this, that I guess this is not a 100-meter run. It is more like a marathon. So we have to work constantly on improving, helping that this gap could be closed. And Christine, you said it in your introductory statement. I think it's all about our mandate, achieving price stability at the end. If you have a better financial literacy background, then you understand what central banks are doing. This is a matter of trust, and it helps us to fulfill our mandate. So for us, it is an important task, and that's the reason why I'm really, really happy to be here today.
Well, fantastic. My dear Claudia, does it matter for supervision after all?
It does.
It does.
It does.
Tell us why.
That's the short answer. But before I give my answer, let me thank Annamaria and her team really for the work they've done, and in terms of really making financial literacy not only a topic for researchers, but also doing policy outreach. And I think nobody will ever have the answer, but maybe a little bit the work you've done has also supported us as supervisors in keeping banks sound and stable. So why am I saying this? Well, because we basically, I mean, what is our mandate? It's also not directly financial literacy, it's not consumer protection, but our mandate is to keep banks sound and stable in the interest of depositors and also people who borrow from the banks. And of course, the better people understand the economics of borrowing, lending, the better their financial knowledge, the easier it is also for us to keep the bank stable so that investment decisions that are being made are sound. So this is why it's immediately important that there's a high degree of financial literacy in the population. That's immediately important for supervisors. And as I said, I guess nobody will ever have the sound scientific answer to that, but maybe the work you've done, Annamaria, with your team, it's not just her, but it's a big team behind it, has helped us a little bit also to increase the level of financial literacy. But we're certainly not there yet. And when I say financial literacy is important for supervisors, a high degree of financial knowledge, I mean this, of course, in the narrow sense. Do people understand compound interest? Do they understand inflation? Do they understand the benefits of diversification? But I also mean it in a little bit broader perspective, in the sense that financial literacy, financial knowledge is also about sound financial decision making. So taking decisions which are sustainable in the medium to long term. And again, this is something we pay very close attention to. We don't work directly, of course, with the customers of the banks, but within the banks, we want to see sound long-term financial decision making. So I think this is another aspect of financial literacy and sound decision making that is really important for supervisors. Now, the second point I want to make is, why are we talking about this around Women's Day? Because this is a general issue. It's men and women very often that don't have a sound financial knowledge, but we see the persistent gap in terms of financial literacy as has been mentioned for women in particular, and it's a very persistent pattern. And we also see a gender gap when it comes to the management and the decision makers within the banks. And here again, apologies that I don't have kind of causal evidence whether these two things are being linked, but maybe there's similar factors underlying this, so that women maybe, and as Annamaria has explained, they tend to cross the I don't know. Maybe they also think a little bit, well, a job in finance is not for me, it's for the others. So I think it would be interesting to explore whether the gender gap that we see in financial literacy, in banks, in finance, whether that is somehow related. And I think that would be really important to also address the underlying causes, so that we have less of a gender gap and also, of course, better, sounder financial decision making everywhere. And then, of course, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what can we do? And I'm sure we come back to this in the panel. I have a few ideas what we can do, but maybe we'll leave this for later.
Okay, so I'll come back to you for the what can we do?
Yes.
That's a brilliant one. I want to go to you, Fabio, with what you actually do, because Banca d'Italia has taken this matter seriously a long time ago for good reasons, and it's extremely convincing. So please.
Thank you, President. And let me start by thanking you for inviting me to discuss this highly relevant topic. And you are absolutely right. Banca d'Italia started working on financial education, financial literacy 10 years ago. And over time, we have launched several projects. We realized that in Italy, we have a significant gender gap. But let me say one thing, because it is important to recognize the gender gap, but then it is even more important to try and understand why you have a gender gap. And Professor Lusardi mentioned that the underconfidence of women is one of the key determinants of the gender gap in financial education. But we have nice results that may shed light on why we get this gender gap. In Italy, the gender gap is relatively persistent over time. We still find a significant gender gap among the young population. We test 15-year-old boys and girls, and we find a significant gender gap. When instead we test the older population, we find the gender gap only for the unemployed women. Employed women have an understanding of financial matters that is, by and large, comparable to that of men. This suggests that the gap in financial literacy is the symptom of a broader problem that is the employment status of women. When women are employed, they get their own remuneration. They have their own bank account. They have to become involved with financial matters almost necessarily. So they avoid, they win the underconfidence, and then the gap becomes much narrower. So this is an interesting result that we find. It's not financial literacy per se, it's a broader issue that involves the condition of women on in the labor market. We have launched several programs, and we have designed those programs based on 3 pillars. First, we try to design the programs based on evidence. We run surveys, we do empirical research, we rely on research by other central banks, the Dutch central bank, others, to try to understand which are the weak groups of the population that deserve our attention. Women, the unemployed, the elderly, immigrants. And we try to design very targeted programs because the treatment that you must give to different groups differs. And third, we have a careful ex post performance assessment of each of these programs so that this helps us to improve the design of the projects. We reach the population in several ways. One that is probably the most effective one is the joint venture, let me call it this way, between the Bank of Italy and the Italian public TV channels. We participate in TV programs with RAI, and we target hours in which you can reach the weaker groups of the population in terms of financial literacy, early morning and afternoon. And we introduce the issue as not in a professorial lecture, but as a conversation between our employees, those who are in charge of financial education at the bank, and the presenter of the TV program. And we introduce basic financial education concepts with examples. So what is a consumer supposed to understand when he has to ask for a mortgage at his or her bank? What should they take into account when they go to the bank to discuss the conditions that they get on their bank account? How should they plan their future in financial terms? How should they build the pension for their old age? So very simple concepts and with examples. We, in 2024, this way, we reached 7 million Italians, so 15% of the population, yeah. And the randomized analysis of the ex post effect of these programs indicates that there has been an improvement in terms of financial literacy on a scale from 1 to 100. 1, you really have a poor understanding of financial matters. 100, you are an experienced banker. There's an improvement of 10 percentage points. And this improvement is larger for women. So this is a quite effective way, and also a way to reach the groups that have lower financial literacy in a way that is easily accepted by them.
Fabio, just to follow up, the financial educators who participate in those television shows, they are staff of Banca d'Italia, right?
Yes.
They're not third parties.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay, terrific. Klaas, dear Governor Knott, you also do lots of things, and you have a special population that you have studied extensively, and I would like you to describe a little bit, particularly in relation to part-time work, which I think is very relevant for the Netherlands.
Okay, Christine, thank you. And I will get into this, but I just want to say up front also how grateful I am to be here on the panel, and this may surprise you, but I'm especially grateful here to be on the panel also with Joachim and Fabio. Because I do believe...
And Claudia as well.
No. Wait. The point that I wanted to try to get across is that I do believe that the cause for equal opportunity and equal right of women should not just be a cause fought by women. That's the point I want to make, because I do believe that also we men, if I may sort of associate myself with that part of the population for a moment, we men, we should not accept sort of being part of a society where the war for talent, and the war for talent is ongoing, should be confined to only 50% of the population. And that is, when I became governor in 2011 in the Nederlandsche Bank, and Frank was with me in the board, of course we had our female network run by the women, and then we had the board, almost all male, and we took note of the activities of the female network, and that was the first question that I then also asked, where are the men? It should be our cause as well. So I'm very happy that you invited us to be here. And in creating equal opportunity for women, I do think closing this gender gap is of utmost importance. Now, we have been doing a survey since 2005 on a consumer household survey together with Professor Lusardi, who worked with a number of researchers from within the bank. And even if the Netherlands has been, I think, at the forefront of many of these activities, and there are also lots of actions being taken in the Netherlands, still the gender gap is also there in the Netherlands, as you saw in the chart. If I can just give a couple of numbers, women receive 40% less in pension benefits than men. And pensions,
40%?
40%. Yeah. The wealth gap is a staggering 70%. That's again dominated by pensions. And the reason, and this was actually in your question, Christine, one of the reasons is that in the Netherlands for a very, very long time, we had relatively low labor force participation of women. And to the extent that we had labor force participation of women, if we had double income earners, the moment the kids came, the woman started to reduce her working hours, and we had the sort of 1.5 income earner system, which was quite common actually, and has been quite common, and is still in certain corners quite common in the Netherlands. But without thinking through sufficiently what that means for the build-up of, for instance, pension assets. And what does it mean in terms of wealth equality? Now also the number of female investors, for instance, in the Netherlands is 20 to 30% lower than male investors. Hourly wages are still 12% lower. And if you look at financial independence, 56% of the women in the Netherlands are financially independent and 77% of the men. So also that is still quite significant. So there's a lot to, that we need to do there. In that household survey, indeed, one of the findings is that part of it has to do with confidence, that men simply will not answer a question saying they don't know. They will bluff their way into an answer, but rather than say no. So if you take out the question, as Professor Lusardi indicated, that explains roughly 1/3 of the difference in responses. So that's a non-negligible factor, I would say. And well, also what makes a difference is we did a study for that was solely focused on payments. Mind the Gap was the title of the study. Men and women traditionally tend to do different financial transactions in a family. So
Explain.
If it comes to the mortgage, sort of the big financial transaction, usually it's left to the men. If it comes to grocery shopping and the small, let's say, weekly transactions, then women have a higher precedence there in these types of payments. And that, of course, leads to an unequal, I would say, decision-making power in a relationship, which I think is also something that is, in principle, unwelcome. It leads to gender disparities in payments. And interestingly, these disparities are not there in same-sex relationships. In same-sex relationships, it is actually very much 50-50 often the case. So that is something that I believe is very important that we pay attention to. Now, one last observation before we leave it to the question and answer session. We have been doing this research since 2005. And one sobering finding is that despite all the activities based on educating kids when they take out their first mobile phone subscription, which is quite a defining moment, educating families about how to run a budget, educating elderly about preparing for retirement, etc., etc. Despite all these activities, and there are numerous activities, I have slides if you want to hear them. I can go on for a long time.
All of that run by the bank?
All of that run in Dutch, no, not just by the bank, run also by the government, run by consumer organizations, by the private banks, the commercial banks. But the point I wanted to make, despite all of that, financial knowledge hardly goes up. So it is very difficult to measure a noticeable increase in financial. Since 2005, we have been doing these surveys. So it is apparently very stubborn material. It is, you have to have a very, very long-term perspective, and it requires a lot of hard work.
Wow. And that you started 20 years ago. So, Madam Professor, what can we do?
Well, this is why we need
And if you want to go back to exploring the confidence factor and what the priorities should be to improve that, please feel free.
Absolutely. Let's take advantage of this confidence factor, because in fact what we see is that women are more perceptive to financial education. And this is why I think we need a targeted program for the women. I've been starting to teach a course in personal finance more than 10 years ago, and I have many female students, by the way, and it's really gratifying to see what that course does for the life of the student, but we need to jumpstart that education much earlier. We need to have it in the schools because we see that it starts very early. And there is also a multiplier effect when you start financial education in the schools because it actually spills over to the parents. And in fact, we found in recent research that it is the daughters who teach the parents, in particular the parents of low socioeconomic status.
The daughters more than the sons.
The daughters more than the son. So empower a girl and that knowledge will be spread over. Empower a woman and that financial knowledge will be spread over, for example, to their children, to their community.
Do you mind if on education, Governor Nagel, you wanted to go in?
Start my argument by using maybe when you try to learn a new language and you try to start this in the age of 25 or maybe 35, it takes you much longer. When you start to learn a language when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, then it goes much, much easier. What I would like to say is that we have to start from the beginning in the school. It should be part of the curriculum. I can say it for Germany when it comes to education. Germany is a really complicated setup. We have 16 federal states, so the states have the responsibility for education. So even when it comes to other areas, not financial literacy, there's also not this, we have many different gaps between the different states. So what I would like to say is there should be a kind of a federal initiative when it comes to financial literacy. It should be, so the kids should confronted with this in the age of 6, 7 years old. But what I feel in Germany, there's often this resistance when it comes to topics like economics. Should that be part of what kids have to learn in school? Yes, I believe it has to be part of everyday's life when you're going to school, learn about all these important things.
And Governor Panetta is going to tell you how it works in Italy.
We may have taken advantage of the cooperation, the long-standing cooperation with Professor Lusardi, and we have launched programs for students. We teach the teachers. We are in touch with a number of districts in the country in which we train the teachers and then we intervene directly in teaching to students. Let me just mention that since last year, financial education is mandatory in primary schools in Italy.
Mandatory, so it's across the country.
It has to be part of the school program. And the Banca d'Italia is has to cooperate with the Ministry of Public Instruction to design the programs and to implement the programs. Wow. So in this sense, we have already done what Joachim very correctly was suggesting to be necessary to improve financial education. But let me say that in Italy, the starting point maybe compared to the Netherlands is different, but we have seen an improvement. Also for females, as I mentioned before, when females are trained and they become employed, their understanding of financial matters improves significantly. And also, the program we have launched for students suggests that, last year we reached 70,000 students. We had an average increase in the understanding of financial matters of 8%, larger for girls than for boys. We also
and
have...
Fabio, that proves the point of
Yes.
you, Professor, that girls are actually very sensitive and respond to education and training.
Absolutely,
right?
and this is part of the improvement I was mentioning before. Also, we have launched a dedicated project for women. Women count. Le donne contano, for the Italians who don't speak English in this room.
La donna conta, yeah?
Exactly. It's a targeted program for adult women in which we introduce basic financial education concepts, addressing the key motivation for the financial literacy gap, which is underconfidence. The program is available on our platform Economics for All, and there's an interactive program for women. And also we intervene also directly, because in some cases, the difficulty that we face is to get in touch with those that really need more training on financial matters, because central banks are highly respected institutions, but sometimes they could intimidate their interlocutors. So we operate this program together with the unions, with women's association, with organizations of civil society, at the regional level with our branches. Again, in a very informal setting, we introduce basic concepts, and here we have our ex-post measures. This is a randomized sample in which you compare the improvement in financial literacy of those who were subject to the project compared to a control sample. The improvement for women was 30%, 3-0.
Professor Lusardi, I'm sorry because I interrupted you.
I was too long, sorry.
Please, I'll go back to you.
I shut up.
The fact that the needle didn't move in the Netherlands over a period of 20 years in the measurements, whereas it apparently moved in Italy.
It does. We need visionary leader to do more work, because the benefits are going to happen in the future, and it's important that we start in the school. We start as soon as possible. I think when the tooth fairy comes, remember, it's going to bring some money, right? So maybe that's time where we can already teaching about money, but also we need to do more. What is done so far, I think, is not able to address this persistent gap. In addition to the school, we need to be in the workplace. We need to be where people go to learn for information. And this is why there is an important role for the media as well. We need to discuss this topic and to discuss it often. We need to make it a topic that we read often, for example, like health or like food.
Right.
At the Initiative for Financial Decision Making at Stanford, one of our mission is to change the conversation about money. Let's talk about it.
Because you are the queen, you know about what Banca Malaysia does. The use of very animated cartoons and just to explain basic principle. What's the difference between inflation and price levels and things like that? Does the format that education take actually matter?
I think it matters a lot, because we want to be everywhere and we want to use the language that people use. Of course, finance has its own language, but this can be a barrier for those who don't speak that language. So sometimes we need to meet in the middle. Right? We need to use a different language, in particular for the adult population, but even for the young. And by the way, women are very affected by that. In our survey, we actually see that as soon as we use jargon, the proportion of do not know increase even further. And I think it discourages, in a sense, as you use a very formal conversation, you might actually miss a lot of the population, and in particularly women. So I think we really need as well to change the conversation ourselves. We need to speak about women, about money in a way that is easy to understand.
Do you think we can do that?
Yes, why not? I mean,
it feels comfortable to be in our jargon, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels comfortable to be in our jargon, but we also know that there are different sort of pieces of research that if you continue to communicate in your jargon, if, for instance, in the Netherlands, there's this subdivision of 5 or 6 social classes in society, we as a central bank, we only reach let's say, 2 out of the 6 social classes because of the channels of communication. And we are thinking very hard, how can we actually also reach, for instance, the working middle class? A lot of the working middle class doesn't read papers anymore. They don't watch the news anymore. So they get their information from totally different channels on which you have to adjust. Now, I think what I think is very, very important is that you do so jointly. And so in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is a relatively small country, so it's maybe a little bit easier to find each other. But we have this platform which is called MoneyWise. It's run from the Ministry of Finance, but the banking industry participates in it, the National Institute of the Budget, the consumer protection authorities, we at the Netherlands Bank participate in it. And so we have this weekly money week, this yearly money week. So we have 1 week in the year, which is entirely focused at money. For instance, employers of D&B then go to the schools of their kids to teach a lesson about money. And these are all interactive games. They're online games that we try to motivate.
Is it all in Dutch?
I guess it is all in Dutch, yes. Yes, it is all in Dutch, but it could easily be translated. I mean, that's nowadays, it's a small effort to translate it. It is all in Dutch, but I would say it's important because the moment, what the point that Joachim was making, when you are young, you learn the things automatically. Yeah. When you're older, it's not automatic learning anymore. So running a budget, for instance, and that the fact that when the budget is finished, that it should also be finished. And that implies also, I think, a bit of teaching for parents, right? Because if your daughter gets to you and say, oh, I'm out of my money, Daddy, please. It's difficult to say no, but you really have to tell parents that maybe...
You've been there, I can see that.
Not every month, but regularly so, I can assure you. So that is quite important, that it is about the kids and it is about the parents themselves. And then secondly...
But I'm intrigued by your idea of the games. So there are games that have been designed?
Oh yeah, online games that are available, and also when we teach in that week, these are very interactive games. And also in our new visitor center, you know, we have our new building, which finally, after 10 years of etc., we have gone back to our new building, and in the new building, in our new visitor center, we all have interactive games about inflation, about financial supervision, but also about running a budget. Knowing where to spend your money and not the make investment choices, etc. Interactive works a lot better than, let's say, the normal material that we use as central bankers. Yeah.
Thank you. Claudia, I interrupted you earlier because I knew I was going to come back to you because you have ideas about what else can we do and what more.
Yes. And actually not very surprisingly, so how we teach finance and economics and to whom, I think this is crucially important. And the second, and this has also been mentioned, it's our communication. To whom do we communicate? How do we do it? How do we explain what we do? So 2 little examples, again, from research that has been done, and I think maybe one project has even been done with the Bundesbank, I'm not fully sure. This was interventions at school where students in Germany were taught financial literacy concepts, and then there was a follow-up. So how would these students then take financial decisions afterwards? And apparently, the result of that intervention of teaching financial literacy was that they're more patient, they're less risk-taking. So there was an impact. So, and I think I would urge, and we've all heard about different initiatives in also different countries, which have different, very different backgrounds. I think it's really important when you do these interventions that you also check how effective they are. So, and this is one example that really teaching financial literacy matters. I have another little example which I think is also interesting, and this is about teaching finance and economics at universities. So there was one study being done at, I think it was Goethe University here in Frankfurt, where there was a big programs on teaching finance and so forth. And so that study looked at the students who wanted to be finance students before they started studying finance, and then also they followed up upon it. And apparently there's also a pre-selection of people into studying finance, maybe even economics, in the sense that these students, and again, I'm just citing the evidence from this study, so I don't know whether this holds also in different samples, but apparently these students were a little bit less willing to cooperate, a little bit more willing to exploit the trust of others. So there seems to be kind of also selection into these topics. So I mentioned this because we talk a lot about, do we have a certain jargon, and who are the people using this jargon? So there might also be a perception in the broader population that this is a different type of people, so they're less willing. And I think whenever we talk about finance and money, trust is so important. So maybe it's also an issue about how do we trust also those who were speaking to us in this financial jargon. And so this, again, I think has implications for us, because we also communicate with a broader population, and we need also, for the work we are doing, we need the trust from the population, that they trust us in maintaining price stability, financial stability, banking supervision. So I think we also need to reach out and maybe also use different narratives and different jargon if we want to reach out to a broader population and explain what we do for them, because this is ultimately what we do in the public sector. So we started this in the banking supervision in the ECB. So when we do country visits, going to the different countries that are members of the SSM, we also reach out to the civil society. So we speak to very different groups. And actually in one country, I saw groups that are working on financial literacy, that are working with the poorest parts of the population. And that was really interesting to see what is happening there. So, but that of course also needs a little bit of work from our side, because we need to change how we talk about what we do. We need to use less technical terms. We need to use narratives that really reach the people. So this is also one of the themes that we follow up upon. I think it's crucially important, not just to whom do we teach, but how do we communicate?
Joachim, thank you very much, Claudia. I was going to ask you the last question for the panel, because then we will turn it over to all of you if you want to ask questions, and I think I will ask you, Paul, to give me a hand on that. But I wanted to you respond to whatever you want, but I also wanted to ask you whether you think that digital is going to help us. I've heard platform here, platform there, La Donna Conta. I mean, clearly there's a new way to reach those targeted audience that Fabio was talking about. If you want to address that as well.
Thank you very much, Christine, because I can connect your question related to what we just discussed. I ask myself, when we're talking about communication, and we love to speak in our jargon. For example, when we are discussing things like R-star, we know what R-star is. But leaving this building here, so leaving this building here, and maybe get between the ECB building and where you're asking people maybe 300 meters, and ask somebody on the street, what is R-star? I believe maybe 1 out of 1,000, maybe 10,000, can tell you what R-star is. So also we have to work on ourselves, the language we are using. And now coming to my point and to the core of your question, using technology. We are testing now for a couple of months AI when I give a speech. Mm-hmm. So when I give a speech, we use an AI tool that gives you an indication, is the content of the speech, could that be understood by an average person? Yeah. And you will get really funny results, funny results. So what I would like to say, it's also something we have to address in a way that it could be understood. So AI and other technologies are super helpful in that regard. Maybe we should have smart approach how to get access to people, especially young people, women, men, everyone. I think there are a lot of good things out, and we are doing a lot of work on that on the Bundesbank side, that we are trying to work together. This is an idea with the university here in Frankfurt to develop such a smart app that could give you an easy access to all the things that we would like to see that kids, young people, but I guess it's for everyone should know, and really financial literacy is, I guess,
but in the form of what, tutorial games?
Yeah, tutorial games, everything.
Stories?
I think we should use the whole range of available
Right.
tools, but AI technology applications on your smartphones, I think we should use all of these things. It's a combination of different instruments. This
Professor
is my point.
Lusardi, do you want to react to that?
We live in the Silicon Valley, and this is what we do every day. Already, AI has been incorporated in our teaching. In the Initiative for Financial Decision Making, we are working on an app which incorporates technology, indeed, and AI, actually to teach the young professional in our case. This is one of the targets, so the people just outside of college and so on. But this is now, I think, we have available a technology that allows us to probably.
Can we all access your platform?
Of course.
How is it
we
called?
Can all, right?
The
It's
name?
called Initiative for Financial Decision Making, IFDM. So, and we are also all invited to visit us
again,
at Stanford
Initiative
for Financial Decision Making.
Okay.
Stanford Initiative for Financial Decision Making. Welcome to our website. We are posting a lot of the initiative. We are also growing the next generations of researchers working on these topics, and we are very happy to also have visitors at our
Great.
university.
And you have money-wise?
Yeah.
Maybe, Christine, one final point. Maybe I forgot this to mention, because we are representing here a different generation. Here we.
What do you mean?
No,
Yeah.
So wait a minute. Let's be specific. Much younger.
So we have to also include the young generation. So we have to use influencers, for example. This is what we are doing when we are doing events, that we are trying to do this via influencers. Try to really reach out to the young generation. So we have to maybe think out of the box when we are talking about financial literacy.
So you mean educating educators would also mean educating influencers and Fabio, and then we open the floor.
Extensively in all our programs. Our platform, Economics for All, is based on interactive relationship with the visitors, and it also uses artificial intelligence. We have used in our Museum of Money digital animations, edu games, interactive technology, immersive educational digital. I'm reading because I barely know what these things mean in detail, but we have been using technology very extensively, and this is necessary to attract the young generations. They like this. They love dealing with financial matters in a digital form, and games. They are really attracted by games.
Yeah. All right, last example.
No, just
And
one
then
example of games. Monetary policy. So what we did, we had an interactive game where kids could sit in a car and they got information on the economy, and you either hit the gas or you hit the brake. And so they physically had to do,
So can we use
to
this
steer
in the governing
sort of
council?
the economy toward 2% inflation.
Hike or cuts?
Exactly.
Hike or
Hike or
cuts? Okay.
cut. Gas or
So
brake.
Christine, we have to have this in the governing council.
And that was big fun. But then on a very basic level, you try to teach the sort of the relationship between what we do and the inflation outcome. So they were presented with new information on the economy. What do? Do you put on the brake, or do you hit the gas?
Wow. And were you training them a little bit beforehand? So
Well,
that
we were handing out prizes at the end for the best performance, and that always works very well.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we continue to be economists. We believe in incentives. Yeah.